Welcome to the session that has changed about 50 times since it was first conceptualized. The focus of this session is intended to help give you an opportunity to become familiar with the creation of materials that can be looked at on a map on your iPad. And so partly the modification has been in trying to sync up the level of the workshop with the interests of those who are participating and the level of experience with the tool sets. And so it's going to be a fairly introductory session in regards to getting familiar with Google Sketchup, getting familiar with Google Earth, and I'm violating all of Eric's rules about the day in many cases because the actual creation that we're doing is going to end up being on the laptops, and then we'll be viewing and consuming within the iPad environment, which doesn't exactly sync up with our original intent of the day. But the focus is on what do we do as instructors to create materials for consumption by our students, and how might we leverage this mobile environment to do that. So the things I'm going to have you walk through are intended to be an orientation in that direction. So I've got a little bit of a, I don't know if anyone's familiar with XKCD, it's a really pretty geeky kind of comic strip. But we've got someone here who is really excited about Google Earth on their iPad, and someone who's a little more skeptical. So, at the risk of having an immediate future versus a more exciting robotic monkeys kind of future, we'll stick to the iPad future right now. Pretty simple. We will take a quick look at Google Earth on the iPad. Then we'll dig into Google Sketchup. Actually, did I reverse my direction here? Nope, I didn't. So, Google Earth on the iPad, Google Sketchup on the laptops, and then we'll come back, if we have time, to an application called SiteSpace 3D on the iPad. So, Google Earth. Let's go ahead and open up Google Earth. And it actually should be probably open on most of the devices that you've got, that we've got there. Does everybody have one of the little, do you have one, Shelton? Do you have one of the laptops? I do. Okay.
I don't know that address we're supposed to be at.
So if we go to, in the tray down in the bottom, Google Earth should probably be already running. And if it's not, then you can go to the little Windows icon, all programs, and then on the next screen scroll down and Google Earth is listed. It should be listed there. So this is Google Earth on the desktop, or in this case a laptop. And we're going to spend most of our time, what I'd like you to do is to now open up your iPads and open up Google Earth. If you haven't had a chance to download it, you can download it while we're talking. But the interface is remarkably similar, but there are some key differences. It was giving me troubles connecting, so I'm going to try it again.
Sorry, I talk on everything, so you'll hear all sorts of bizarre sounds coming from this part of the room.
Okay. So within the environment, it's fairly intuitive. Click and drag with one finger to move things around. You can do, up in the search bar, up in the top, you can just type in an address, but you can also just type in a location. So if you type in Boise State University, then it should zoom you in to see the campus. And then, like many other things on the iPad, if you have two fingers and you pinch and spread them apart, that is pinch and zoom, so you can zoom in. And the closer you zoom in, you'll actually then start to also tilt. Your perspective will tilt down. And pinch together to zoom back out. You can turn, there's a layers button up in the upper left-hand corner. The layers button automatically has some things checked and others not. If you are logged in, then you can go to My Maps, and you can connect with your boisestate.edu account, a project to any maps that we create will be saved in your Google account. So then once you save those maps, they'll be available from within this interface. But for right now,
how do you flip it?
By flip it, you mean?
No, flip like this, because if you have Google Earth on desktop, you actually can rotate and flip.
if you click on the little wrench icon up in the upper toolbar, then there is an option set that says Auto Tilt. And if you turn that on, and then go ahead and close the toolbar, then it's actually fighting with the page orientation. So if your screen keeps flipping back and forth, your iPad wants to follow you, like and change it from landscape to portrait, you can turn that off. I'll show you quickly. If you double-click your home button to bring up that bottom toolbar, and then swipe to the right, this is always at the left end of that little toolbar. And this little icon in the corner, if you click on that, it will lock the orientation in whatever view you're currently in. So especially if you're laying in your easy chair and reading, and it's tilting to the side and it keeps flipping back and forth, it's very handy to be able to flip it and lock it from flipping. Once that's locked in place, if you have the auto tilt on, then moving your device up, it's not going to fight with the iPad and change your orientation. It's just going to be controlling the orientation. Yeah, so if you double click on your home button at the very bottom, then you can swipe to the right, and then at the very kind of left-handed edge of all those apps, there's this, and this is also, it's your brightness control. There's a slider here to do your brightness up and down, and then also your music, if you've got music installed. But that's always on the left-hand side of that little menu. So I'm going to turn auto tilt off, and another thing that changes with your two fingers, if you click and then turn your two fingers, then that will rotate your orientation. And so you can actually combine them, turn and pinch at the same time. So once you get, it's actually quite intuitive once you get the hang of it. So anything that has been, these layers that show up in this little menu, those layers are actually other services on the web that have geolocated data associated with them. So the easiest example to talk about is the photos, Panoramio photos. That's a service where I can take a picture, and if my camera is recording the location, which by default your iPad is always recording the GPS data along with the picture. If I take a picture with my iPad and upload it to Panoramio, then it's going to be tagged with the GPS coordinates for where I took that picture. By turning on the layer for Panoramio photos, then any photos that are geotagged within Panoramio will then show up. So it's a little hard to see because they're so teeny here. But you can see that there's a, well, you really can't. There's a little photo icon. So if I click on that, I'm actually opening an interface to the Panoramio website and seeing the photo that was taken and tagged in that location. So it takes a little bit of getting used to the concept, but the layer is actually connecting this interface to all the photos that have been geotagged in the Panoramio service, and then letting you use this as the selector. Instead of doing a search by title or doing a search by the person who took the photo, we're going to a location and seeing all of the photos and doing a search by GPS coordinates.
And your camera has to be turned on to GPS coordinates when it takes its picture.
There are a couple of ways to do it. Most services that allow for geotagged photos will accept any camera that automatically tags them. But when you upload it, you can also usually just indicate on a little map, here's where I was when I took this picture. So after the fact, you can tag it as well. So for from a teaching perspective, and even from a course material generation perspective, this becomes almost, you could think of Google Earth as a search engine for, I want to go to a location and I want to find pictures that people have taken in this location. Google Earth may never even figure into the ultimate content that you use, but it might be the interface that you use to discover that content, if that makes sense. So one possible way to think of Google Earth in terms of creating course content. That's a pretty simple way. All right. So I was going to, it's not, the layers aren't showing up here. So Google Earth, there are a couple of other options in the menu. This little arrow icon right here, that's a pretty universal icon as well. But if I click on that, it says Find Me. And these devices aren't technically using GPS, but the Apple devices can, what they do is, you're on a Wi-Fi network in order to use this, and the Wi-Fi network has a location. And so by connecting to the Wi-Fi network, it's a little bit scary how well it knows where I am. It's going to keep zooming in and see the shiny top of my head here. So even with just Wi-Fi, even though technically there's no way we could be having GPS connectivity, it's bridging with the Wi-Fi information and locating things according to that.
You're moving there.
I'm walking around. Where am I going?
Well, you'll see too the circle expands and contracts based on how accurate it thinks it's being.
Yeah.
So the circle is kind of like the margin of error, if you will. So when the circle's really big, it's kind of like, I
think
kind
you're
of know where you are, but and then as the circle shrinks, it's saying, I think I've got you pinpointed a little bit more accurately.
So the last thing here is just a little north button, and that just reorients the map back to north. One of the things once you start playing around with Google Earth is you'll find you'll get into really awkward, kind of tilted, like how do I get back out? And it can be helpful to have both reset my position and reorient to north so that I can just stop. So on the desktop version, the little compass icon, and there's another one that's a slider for zooming in and out. It's interesting. Those are prominent features if you're using the desktop version of Google Earth, and you need to learn how to use zooming in, learn how to use the little, it's like a joystick. The best way to think of the little round thing is like a joystick to kind of drag around and move. But the interesting thing is it's completely unnecessary. They don't even put it into this because I just touch and drag and move. So from an interface perspective, it's pretty interesting.
Dale, I noticed on my iPad, it actually has a different icon for the Find Me. Instead of the arrow or the airplane shape, it's got like a circle with a cross inside it, but it does the same function. So I don't know if any of you have that same icon, if we have a different version of the software.
I think it's probably because this also has a cellular connection along with the Wi-Fi connection, and so it really knows where I am.
It appears to be the same thing.
Yeah.
Mine's the same icon as yours, and I have no cellular.
No cellular.
It's
Okay.
probably just version of Google Earth.
Okay.
Okay. So far, super simple. Just taking a look at Google Earth. Any questions about what Google Earth is like? If you just before we move on, go ahead and just click a location, Paris, and it'll find Paris near me unless you specify specifically. But apparently, it knows with Paris that there's only one.
Now there's Paris, Idaho.
Yeah. Because I was afraid that's where I thought it would go.
And that
But
looks like the population of Parasite.
that's right. So within Paris then, same kind of situation, but now the photos are going to be much more exotic than Boise State University photos. And if you get tired of all those dots are layers. They come from layers. And so you can turn off Panoramio, you can turn off Wikipedia. But first I wanted to just have the concept of Google Earth as an interface for other types of web data. Because projects that you work on, for example, I've worked on a project where we used an online tool called Omeka. And the assignment was for students to build basically digital museum, online museum, curate a collection. And as part of that process, they had to add geotagging data. Then it's possible, because of the databases that are in Omeka, to create an export that is Google Earth friendly. So with the project, it's a digital humanities project. If you're familiar with the capacity of tools like Google Earth, you don't have to build Google Earth in order to take advantage of the rich environment. What you have to do is to figure out how to get the data that you're collecting or creating to show as a layer within Google Earth. So that's a far way away from where we are right now, but conceptually that's the seed I wanted to plant, is that Google Earth can be seen as an interface, as a location, as a layer viewer for the content that you want to present to your students. Okay, so any questions about that? All right, let's go ahead and move on then. Okay, we'll come back to Google Earth in a minute, but let's take a look at Google Sketchup. So it also may be running on the laptop. If it's not, if you go to the Start menu and All Programs, scroll down, then we want to launch Google Sketchup. Now the first time, Google Sketchup is an application that wants to create three-dimensional shapes. It's fairly universal in that it can be used to make 3D shapes to design jewelry, or it can be used to make 3D shapes to describe the architecture of cities. And so you can imagine that going from that small scale to that large scale, there are some setup options that you want to indicate that says what kind of project am I going to be working on. Most of the time, since you're going to be working on the same kind of project, it will remember the template that you choose when you very first start it up, and you very seldom will change it. By default, it's going to help you out with links to tutorials, tips and tricks, all of that fun stuff. Right now, we can close that by clicking on the little arrow next to Learn. And we want to look at the template section. By default, it's going to take you to the top of the list using feet and inches. There's not a huge difference, but what we're going to do is scroll down, and we're going to go to Google Earth Modeling, feet and inches. So, does everybody have that? Once that's selected, then let's go down to Start Using SketchUp, down in the right corner. And a new version of SketchUp. I installed it like 2 hours ago. So SketchUp is fairly unique. Is there anyone who's used other types of 3D modeling tools before? Okay, SketchUp is rather unique in the approach that it takes to creating shapes. And so there's one of the things that we're going to cover. We're going to go over all the basics of the tools for creating shapes. But before we do, the reason we chose the Google Earth template is we want to associate our drawing with a location. And even if we never publicize it, export it, do anything with it, we want to do that up front if we think there might be a chance that later on that we're drawing a building, for example. So I'm going to start out with something that usually is going to come a little bit later in the process. But we want to, this little, looks like a crinkled map icon with a down arrow. Go ahead and click on that very first. And so we're gonna come back to this because this is it's going to add a view of the world that's going to kind of confuse our drawing. But I want you to know that usually it's a good idea once you're starting to do this first. So because it's easy to forget to do this. It's not impossible to do after you've finished your drawing, but it's just so much easier, especially if you're modeling buildings. It's easier to do this first, and I'll show you why in a minute. But that location, we're going to come back to this little icon. That little icon is where we type in an address and go right to the place that we're going to model. So let's close out of that. We're not going to actually go there right now. And let's start with the very basics of SketchUp. Your tools across the top. Your select tool is going to be your most common one as we're moving around. Your line tool and your rectangle tool, building buildings are going to end up being the tools that you use most often. But let's describe the shape, and then we'll drag a shape into it. This is a three-dimensional view. It's called an isometric view. We're looking up, and we're standing up and to the right, looking down. So we have a horizontal axis in red, a vertical axis in blue, and a z-axis, a depth axis, going back in green. And so what I want you to do is to click once on the rectangle tool that's up here. And you'll find that as you drag the tool around in the interface, before we even click, it's going to snap to these axes. So it wants to be aligned with an axis somewhere. We're going to go right to the middle of everything to start. So right in the center where all of these axes cross is going to be our origin point. And SketchUp behaves just a little bit differently on a Mac than it does on a PC. The primary difference when you're creating things is on the PC, the default setting is if I click, then that's where I'm starting, and I'm letting go. I'm dragging somewhere else, and then I click again to finish. It works that way with the rectangle tool on the Mac, but later we're going to use the line tool. And the line tool, you have to hold down and drag. So there are just a couple of differences, but we're all, except for Eric, on PCs. So if you click once on this axis with your rectangle tool and start to drag out a shape, you'll notice that as you approach what would be a perfect square, it's going to snap to that as well. You're going to get this diagonal line that indicates I'm drawing a perfect square. So let's do that. Let's draw a perfect square by clicking. And now we have a square shape in space that there's no depth. We have no vertical depth. It's just a single line on the horizontal axis. So this is actually, we'll jump immediately to the cool part of SketchUp. This tool is called the push-pull tool. And if I select the push-pull tool, that's a nice little tongue twister, and move down, as I'm floating over the top, you'll see that there is a dotted line, kind of a grid, that goes over the top of the shape that I just drew. That's SketchUp's way of telling you that if you do something right now, this is the part that's going to be affected. And as we get more complex shapes, you'll see that as we rotate around, that little grid will pop onto various parts of the drawing. That's just the way of saying that here's where I'm paying attention right now. So if we click and drag up,
I think someone messed with the settings on mine because I'm just drawing a line.
okay.
And when I went into
Spirits.
I wasn't sure what to click. Just draw a line.
Let's do click. And then let's do this rectangle shape.
I think.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And that is something that, whatever you learn, is almost impossible to, like, as soon as if somebody else changes that setting to something else, it drives you nuts. It's not something you can overcome. So you will all be click, drag, click people, or whatever, click, move, click people, whatever the orientation is.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed is as you're dragging out your shape or whatever, you can see how big it is.
Yep.
And but dragging, say you were trying to say I want exactly 13 feet, and so 13 feet and a half inch isn't good enough and stuff. So you drag it kind of approximate, but it's really hard to be precise. Is there a way to go in and adjust that?
There is. One of the key features of Google SketchUp is that it's always paying attention to your keyboard. And so So what Eric's saying is if you look down in the right-hand corner, the lower right-hand corner, as I'm dragging up and down, it's saying, okay, now I'm at 6 feet 3/4 inches. But I want to go to something on my drawing and be very precise. Well, I haven't clicked yet to finish this drag. And so what I can do is I can say 1, 5, and then hit the little single quote mark for feet, and hit enter, and I've got 15 feet exactly. So review that again. I take the push-pull tool, I click on my shape and start to extrude it. But I haven't clicked again yet to say I'm finished extruding. I just let go of my mouse, and then I say the measurement that I want, just start typing. Sketchup will pay attention, and then you say whether it's feet or inches, you type that, hit enter, and it will complete the extrusion at that height.
This is a 7 battery for the cords.
I have cords. I don't know if we have extension cords. Let's see. Well, she's off.
I changed computers, but this one probably needs to be charged up regardless.
Okay.
Maybe you won't have the person.
It's just a barrel full of monkeys kind of running.
What is,
Over there, there's one public station.
We asked them for power strips for the tables, and they did not comply. Okay, sorry about that, Leslie.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, has everyone then click with push and pull, and then before you click again, type the numbers, hit enter, and we have extruded to a height. Is yours also dead? I think we have lots to spare. Thank you. Ted, would you mind, I think Ken knows where to go to talk to the tech support people.
Oh, I know where they're at.
Could you ask him again for power strips?
Power strips, you got it.
Because I have a feeling this isn't going to
Yeah.
snowball. Okay, so any questions about the block that we've created here? All right, so now we've gone over using the rectangle tool to drag a shape out, the push-pull tool, and then typing in a value to give it a certain height. Now we want to look at it. So our beautiful creation here, if you move over to where the blue icon begins, this little blue icon with 2 axes with arrows, click on that, and that's our orbit tool. So if we drag around with the orbit tool, we can see all sides of our creation.
I'm sorry, where's the orbit?
The blue with 2 arrows looks kind of like a little globe. So we click on that and drag around. That tool will actually become your best friend. So if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, then you can roll the scroll wheel in and out to zoom in and out on your drawing. You can click and hold the scroll wheel, and I believe it should orbit. There are lots of laptops. So if you click and hold, is it orbiting when you click and hold? So that's by far the quickest shortcut to the orbit tool. Click your scroll wheel and move it around. Okay. The tool next to that is the pan tool, which just keeps you in the same forward orientation and slides you back and forth. So if we click on the little hand and drag back and forth, then that will
allow us to orient the right way. The zoom tool is going to be click and drag to zoom in and out, which if you've got the scroll wheel, you'll never use. And then the last little magnifying glass there with the arrows on the side is zoom out until your entire drawing is in the view. And so that's to kind of reorient, at least from the extent of seeing the entire drawing. So, orbit tool, pan tool, zoom tool, all of which, if you have the scroll wheel on your mouse, you'll never touch those buttons because it becomes pretty intuitive with the mouse to be able to move around. Any questions about views so far? So we're dealing with a really simple shape here. You will ultimately deal with more complex shapes, and what I'll go over right now really quickly is the view menu up here. Allows you to change the style of both the edges, which are your lines, and the faces, which are the spaces in between them. And you can do, for example, a wireframe and just see the lines themselves. There's an X-ray view that allows you to see through. Usually, the one that you'll end up using if we're doing much modeling of buildings is shaded with textures. Because right now, these faces have no texture on them. It's just a gray surface. But it's possible within Google SketchUp to say, use this picture as the face of this shape. And so one of the easiest things to do in making buildings, the way that Google SketchUp creates buildings, is you create a simple shape, take a picture of it, and splash it across the top of the front of it, modify your shape until it matches up, and then you've got a simple primitive of your building. If that's the case, if you're working with textures, then you'll use this view of shaded with textures. But I'm going back to shaded. Let's make sure to get everybody juiced up here. All right, so now what I'd like you to do, we're going to actually delete our beautiful blocks. So let's go back to the selection tool over at the far end. And if you click on your model, you'll see that it tells you I have this face selected because I clicked once. Now, I can hit delete. And all I've done is to delete that face. Okay? So if I Control Z to undo, and I triple click 3 times in quick succession, then that tells it I want to select this face and everything else that's connected to it. Sorry about this, guys.
Do you need that over to this one?
Yes, will you power this table?
Oh, yeah.
we've got our shape. We're talking about selecting parts of a shape. If you click once on a face, it will select just that face. To select the entire shape, everything that's connected to the shape, we click 3 times in rapid succession. And what you'll find is you want to be careful with that because as soon as 2 things touch in SketchUp, they're part of the same object. And more than once, I promise, if you're doing anything complex, you'll triple click thinking, I'm just grabbing this thing, and it has intersected with the rest of your entire drawing, and you delete it, and undo is your best friend. So I've got this entire thing selected, and I'm going to say delete. So I'm going to start over, and we're going to start our project here, which is we're going to make a little house. So I'm going to drag it using my pan tool, the little hand tool. I'm going to drag the center over to the left side of my window because I'm going to drag out my rectangle for my house out in this direction. So I want to give myself a little bit of space to move. So with it over here, I'm going to get my rectangle tool. And this time I don't want a square. I'm just going to do a nice little fat rectangle. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my push-pull tool. And I'm going to drag that up. And it's really... And before I told you that if you hadn't let go, you can still make changes. Actually, until you've done anything else, you can still type in. And because this tool has been selected, it'll try and still adjust. So you can continue to make modifications to your height. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the line tool, the little pencil icon. So with your push-pull tool, what probably happened is that you dragged it up and then there was never a final click to say, I'm finished. So then when you move your mouse to go grab the other tool, it keeps moving. But
I did the double click or the single click and then put in the number I wanted.
oh, and it went down. Did you do feet?
It seemed to me
And that you went like
it seemed
under.
to me to go earlier that whatever direction you drag it is the direction it's going to go.
So if you go
So you just
below
got to make sure that you drag
I have to
that.
drag it, then put in the amount, not just select and put in the amount. Okay,
Yeah.
that was my, okay.
Because it will do negative numbers and go underground as well. Okay, so with your line tool selected, you'll notice that as you drag around on the edges, I don't know why it keeps doing this to me. Then what we want to do is we're going to make a roof here. We're going to do a gabled roof. So I want to draw a line down the center to start to indicate where we want the tip to be. If I move my line tool along this edge, when I get to the exact center, it's going to snap. So it knows where the middle of every line is. So I've got my line tool. I'm on the far edge. I'm going to click once to start, and I'm going to drag all the way across. Now, you can see that I can drag off of that green axis and do any angled line that I want to. But it's almost always a good idea because we started exactly on these axes. It'll let us draw square and perpendicular lines very easily from that point on. That's why we orient it to those axes to start with, is so that that's always a reference point for us. So I'm going to click once over here, drag all the way across till I get to the other line, and I'm going to click again. And now I have a line. What I've done is intersected these two, and in SketchUp, that makes them into two separate shapes, two separate faces. Now I can do different things to each shape if I wanted to. So, for example, if I take my push-pull tool and I go over on one side of this, I can now drag down, and that line becomes a division point. So I can interact with just one part of my drawing based upon the division from that line. But that's not what I want to do, so I'm going to Control Z. What I want to do is this Move tool, which is like the X with arrows on it, I'm going to use that to click on my line just once. Whoop, I said just once. Okay, and as soon as I click, I can start to drag, and you can see that if I move around, it's kind of easy. For right now, you can see I can drag it in any direction. If I click again, you'll see, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. That's a little skiwampus. And so what I'm going to do is say undo. And if I pay attention with my Move tool, so let me back up. If I've moved away, I've done different things after I've drawn my line, it's going to be hard for me to grab this line with the Move tool if it's not selected. So the first thing I want to do is get my Selection tool, click once on that line so that it's blue, then go to my Move tool, and I should be able to drag. And as I drag, you'll see that I can snap to the blue axis, which is vertical. And if I stay on the blue axis, then I'm not going to have a skiwampus gable. You know, it kind of looks skiwampus here. I think I didn't raise the one side of my house back up all the way. But I think we're good. So, now I have my little shape of a house. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do is let's do a door. So all I need to do is to take another rectangle, and as I'm dragging, you'll see that it's got a little teeny square next to my pencil icon. That says that I'm drawing on the face that's behind the pencil right now. So if I go to the location where I want a door, and I drag it out, snap it down, now I have a door. I can go up to my Push-Pull tool and just bump it in a little bit. I can do the same thing with the Circle tool. Now the Circle tool is a little bit different. With the Rectangle tool, we start at the corner and we drag it out. The Circle tool, we start in the center and define the radius from there. So I'm going to click and drag and define a circle. Again, with my Push-Pull tool, I can pop that in a little bit. It becomes pretty simple to make basic shapes with just the tools that we reviewed so far. Some of the really basic tools within SketchUp. Any questions? Okay. So now what we're going to do is let's add a location and type your address. Build your house, your neighbor's house. Once you have an address typed in here, and you have a location showing, this is like a view from Google Earth, like from the top of Google Maps. what we want to do is to say select region. Now this is, again, the little map icon, what we clicked at the very beginning. Then we type in an address. It's going to show us a location. We use these pins to describe the area right around the structure that we want to work on, or that we're already working on. And once we've got it oriented, showing the location that we want, the important thing to realize here is we're doing two things. It's looking at visual information to give us a cue to make sure that we're getting the right place. But what it's really doing is capturing geographic information. It knows what the latitude and longitude of this little snapshot is. So when we say grab, then it creates, apparently mine, is anyone showing a preview, or do you get the same error message I'm getting? Does it, once you've got it on there, does it show you?
I've got a few.
Okay, so select region up in the upper corner.
Oh, I see.
Right, I think it's probably,
Yeah, I got the same access tonight.
so I think it's the way they have these laptops set up. Ted's is actually showing kind of what you see, even though it's an error here. It'll give you a snapshot on the ground, and it'll lay the view that you just took into that space. So imagine that we see that picture, and what we can do is resize our drawing if we want, move.
You want me to plug in upstairs?
I think it's okay because the advantage would be, the reason you want to do it is because, well, the reason you start with that process if you're going to be modeling a building is because you actually use the picture to define the original parameters of your building. When you're drawing that rectangle out, you can drag it right over the top of the image that you've snapped from Google Maps. That not only makes sure your size is correct, but you're then positioning that object in GPS space. So this is where I was referring earlier to the fact that that's what we want to do first when we're doing models. So the other thing, quickly, I mean, we ideally would have entered all of our measurements, but if you want to just have a quick preview and your space is too big, you can go to the Tools menu. Well, first of all, use your Select tool, triple click so that everything in your object is selected. If you go to the Tools menu and say Scale, then you can drag this down and make it into a more viable space. With it still selected, if I use the Move tool, I can move it over on top of my space. Now this is not, it's not how you would do things, but in the interest of time, I'm just popping it into this space. So then, the final product is, if we can say click to preview in Google Earth, and see how many error messages it throws at us. So even with all of your error messages, if you clear them out, just cancel, cancel, and go to Google Earth, it actually probably will take you to that location, even though it's throwing all of the errors.
Okay, say that again.
So if you say open a preview in Google Earth in the upper corner, right here, then probably will bark at you as many times with all these errors. Just cancel, cancel, cancel. But now go to Google. Okay, your object just still jumped there. So it will take you to the location that you entered and show you your shape in that space.
So what if we,
So now, we aren't, we're not on the iPad, but the iPad, so the way to do this would be to, you can save these. I told you before, you can log in to Sketchup and log into Google Earth with your boisestate.edu account. So what you can do is say, save this into My Places. And it will remember the shape, and it will remember the location. But more importantly then, even if you're on your iPad, you can log into Google Earth and say, go to My Places, and then you can see all the models that you've generated from there. So My Places becomes kind of like the Dropbox for shape-related files.
I'm sorry, say it again. Where
Yeah.
you save to My Places is.
Yeah, so in SketchUp, then if we go to save, there, what it will do is save it as a SketchUp shape on your desktop, which is like the backup copy. Then when we go to, actually I think the best way to do it is going to be to preview it in Google Earth, like we've done. And then from Google Earth, you can say, over in the side, you can say save this to My Places.
Oh.
So once you've loaded it into Google Earth, this checkbox over here is checked as a temporary place. So with that checked, if we go up to the File menu and say Save, then Save to My Places is one of the options. And so it looks like the easiest way to do it is to build it in SketchUp, preview it in Google Earth, then save it to My Places. So if I do that, then it moves from temporary places up into My Places. And theoretically, then if I go to my iPad and log in, I should be able to go to My Maps. And it's not there yet. So I'm not sure how quickly it goes, but it will be available there.
so Dale, two questions. One Google SketchUp related, the other, I guess, Google Earth related. And then maybe you've already showed this. If you did, I apologize. If you took that house and said, well, the door is oriented to the right, not facing this way, how would you flip that building 90 degrees on the
Everything, so ideally, when I'm in SketchUp, it's showing me all the correct orientation right here. And so that's why if you're building the building from scratch, I suggest you do that first. So you have that as a reference point, and then you draw your building using that as a bit of a template. But it is possible, if I've selected my entire building, to go to my tools and say rotate. But this is a little bit funky. The rotate tool is not as intuitive as it should be. It's really powerful, but it's also really easy to mess things up.
Okay, so there's not really like it's type in like flip me 90 degrees.
That's a good question.
That's okay, I just wondered.
Yeah.
Let me ask my Google Earth question.
Okay.
Which is probably maybe more pertinent to teaching and learning aspect. Can I take My Places and share them with others in an easy way?
You can. You can. What we would want to do to share them is actually to export them. All of this data is standardized in a format that is known as a KMZ file. And it's those KMZ files that are interchangeable all over the place. If you email someone a KMZ file as an attachment and they double click it, it will try to open it in, Google Maps will read it, Google Earth will read it, and any number of other kind of geographic, GIS type files can read KMZ files. So to do that, as opposed to previewing in Google Earth, once you're finished, you would just go File, Export, 3D Model. And then that will create either a Kaleida file, which is the newer version that Google's moving towards, but the more universal file is the KMZ file. It's kind of like the equivalent of a text file versus a rich text file.
So if you've already added the location in Google SketchUp, then will that location be
Yep.
part of the KMZ, so it'll not only bring in the model, but sit it in the right spot?
Correct. Yeah.
All those KMC files that you referenced.
Yeah.
So even if you, let's say, you do Net My Run, Net My, all those fitness apps you can find in the Mundo, you actually can export that as well as a KMC file.
Okay, so I have,
So then to share that with students, you might just post it on Blackboard, the KMZ file, or put it in a Dropbox or whatever, and then they get it and open up in their own.
so I'm going to hand you a QR code for your iPad. What I'd like you to do before we're finished here, this is an app that you get as a participant in this workshop. And if you could scan this and redeem it, and then write your name on this for me, even though we don't have pens in our pockets. Each one of these is an individual code, so I just need to know who redeemed each one of them. So before you leave, if you could just hand it back to me with the signature, then I can use these as a reference for the file. So this file is a viewer for KMZ files. And so it'll take a minute to load it. But before you launch it, I actually want you to go into your Dropbox application once it's installed. Once SiteSpace is installed, we're going to go to Dropbox and go to the folder for this session. And that is in Summer Institute 2012, Day 3.3, Maps and Mapping. Bronco Stadium. If you click on Bronco Stadium, it'll come up and say, unable to view the file, because it's not able to preview it. But our magic little open in icon up in the right-hand corner should, once you've got it installed, SiteSpace should come up as an option.
There it is.
And once you've got that, then this is a file that was created in SketchUp, saved as a KMZ file, and we're now able to open it from within this application and move around. So this is different than Google Earth, but it allows, there's a whole library, 3D warehouse on Google of shapes that people have created and buildings that people have created, that this then becomes a browser of sorts for that 3D information space.
So, I scanned it and I went to the App Store and it tells me the code has already been used. Usually when that happens, then it still pops up and begins downloading.
Mine is still loading.
Is there a
I
watch?
scared it.
Thank you.
Well, it's loading.
Cool. So then you press load.
Down on the way. So your scan, let's scan that one more time.
Press load for anything?
You can, but that's to load other models. So now you're here, so you can just zoom in, move around, view. Yeah, and
Actually,
that,
it's here, it's here.
Summer
in
is
our library.
right. And you can go to the Google 3D warehouse from here and load other models, other buildings.
Okay.
So this actually can be used as a presentation tool for anything that's included in the 3D warehouse.
Yeah, I know what I did. Why I did it, but it.
Did I get my iPad taken away?
What was that?
Scooting. Oh, now it's not coming up.
That 180 degree, right?
Exactly. That's fine.
All right, then we'll do it.
Yeah, I bet that was real popular.
App Store
And here's for Nancy, I think.
and
Chicago Index.
that's the code. I'll type that code in.
Chicago.
Double click here to caps lock. All right. Any questions?
Just grab it and just place it in
I noticed in, no, this is just general.
Okay.
I noticed when you do the iTunes sync, it gives you the ability to sync documents with Google Earth. Does that share my maps or place marks or?
Google iTunes is basically like using your USB cable as a tether to load things onto your device. And so if you sync to your iTunes with your iPad and you go to apps, this one we just did will show up in that list.
Oh, okay.
And if you click on there, you can say load, and you can load any KMZ files that you have on your desktop through that interface.
Okay.
But it's only for that connection. You're not copying them to anywhere like the 3D warehouse or to My Places or anything like that. So it's just a file exchange connection when you're syncing to iTunes.
Okay. I thought maybe you could do place marks.
Yeah, and there are ways to save in Google Earth place marks, export them. Usually you have to go back to your desktop, save as a KMZ file. So, but it's kind of a round trip thing.
Yeah.
You can take notes, like within this application. There's some features for adding notes and bookmarks for a specific view of the materials. So the primary way to think of this would be as a presentation tool. So if you had your iPad hooked up and wanted to share a model with students and zoom in and click on notes that you've left, you could also, at the same time, share that KMZ model with them and have them look at the models themselves in their own time as well. So different, depending on what your strategy is, your pedagogy, then you can do all of those things. So I apologize for the technical glitches, but if you have projects that you'd like to explore, please give us a call. We'd love to dig into this kind of stuff with you.
Can I be shameless and make a plug for an upcoming class? In spring 13, I'm teaching CRP 510, which is Advanced GIS Technologies, Applications and Visualization. So there will be actually a section on 3D Sketchup, 3D visualization, basic designs, and then the final project will be in the 3D mini cave of our department. So if you have students who are interested in that, maybe you yourself want to audit the class.
And we have also have other software on campus, Arcgis, and there's a company called Esri that does an entire suite of really amazing, I mean it's professional and GIS type equipment, and I believe we have a site license, and so it just is a matter of getting connected in the right way, but we can explore that further as well. But there are apps for the iPad, and if you're connected to the to an ArcGIS server with the data, the possibilities are limitless for the kinds of mapping census data and ethnographic kinds of studies that have been done that that you can just layer upon layer. ArcGIS is a pretty standard platform for that type of data integration with GIS. So.
Dale, somebody was telling me yesterday, I can't remember, Thomas, if it was you or it was somebody else I was talking to, but somebody was telling me that there's actually a course offered through, of all people, the Idaho State Tax Commission in GIS.
Is that right?
Because, yeah, I guess.
They use it for census data?
I'm trying to remember who I was talking to. They were saying, yeah, exactly. Oh, was that you?
Yeah.
You are,
I don't know much more. I can tell you how to get in touch with the owner.
but if somebody, so you were saying that you couldn't take it here for whatever reason, but
I
you were
couldn't
able to take it
take
there.
the class in geosciences, but they gave me this person to contact downtown the Idaho Tax Commission, so they use it for property tax stuff.
Wow.
Well, there's a virtual campus, and we do have licenses for that as well. So if you want to do like a do-it-yourself learning introduction level class, there's a way to hook you up on that through the educational site license.
What's the name of your class?
It's called GIS Applications and Planning Visualization. And so long as just call it Advanced GIS.
Hey, you're a fisherman, right? You're a fisherman in the group. I saw you.
I got my fishing license yesterday in the mail. In 10 years that I've been fly fishing, only one day I ate.
So we'll put a
Shelf is fly fisherman too.
So if I could get you little strips of paper with your names on them, they're not, they're worthless to you now.
Did you already turn your?
I did, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Part of what I want to experiment with is doing distribution that way, you know. And if I can get this, the next step for me is to have something where you're scanning the QR code.
Thank you.
And it's actually taking me to my site where it's recording in your